All right, thank you. Yeah, so I half lost my voice yesterday, and I'm very raspy today. So you'll have this raspy baritone voice that cracks. So it's gonna be great. So yeah, bear with me. So code generators are dead, as we talked about, but long live code generators. So what's this all about? Well, first, if you haven't seen, Phoenix.1.8 RC was like the great generators release. So we had some big things in this, but it was mostly around code generators. So we added an authentication generator, and we reworked some of the live generators to simplify things a bit. People have complained about them being overly complex. So this release was really about streamlining the generators, adding some major new authentication features, and introducing scopes, which I think I talked about 2 years ago. I thought it was last year, but anyway, at ElixirConf EU, I was like, we're going to add scopes. It's super simple, and it took us a year because I just didn't have time to work on it. But the big cool feature that we've added is magic link authentication, which is essentially passwordless authentication. So this is a video of how this works on your Phoenix LiveView, Phoenix.new. You just register with emails, and I'll pause it here. So one of the issues with email-based login flows is in local development, it's super cumbersome because how do you get the email? Where do you actually use that flow locally? Do you have to set up some kind of mailbox thing? Well, the Phoenix has had a dev mailbox since forever. It's been years. It's just we haven't really promoted it. It's in your router, so it's that unusual looking if environments dev, add these dev routes. So the dev mailbox has been there for quite a while, but now we're putting it front and center in this flow. And you'll notice that the actual template itself, at the bottom here, the template actually gives you a link. So in dev only, you'll see a link to the dev mailbox, so you just click that. So this all comes at the cost of in dev, you click a link, and then inside the swoosh mailbox, you click a link, and you're logged in. So this is a full end-to-end user flow. In production, you're going to configure SendGrid or Mailgun or whatever you use, and then you're logged in. And the nice thing about this, I'm showing off the Daisy UI integration as well, but the nice thing about this flow is you get some nice features, your user registration is the same level of effort as a user login, right? The user enters an email, there's no password to remember, they click a link in their mailbox. Same registration flow as logging in. And you also get automatic account confirmation out of the box. So you gain some other nice features where it's no longer let the user in, but then send them the email, and then they have to be in this defunct mode where they can't do everything because their account needs to be confirmed first, and you have to do that whole confirmation flow. That just becomes the registration flow. So we ship this, super nice, and we finally ship scopes, which has been a little bit misunderstood. So this is a generator level feature only. So Phoenix itself, there's no library wow, so I'm sick, okay? There's no library function call that, and I write JavaScript. There's no library function call that receives a scope and is aware of this data structure. So I've seen some comments oh, it's just more Phoenix magic, and it's this is literally the least complex feature. It's literally a struct in your app that your app wholly owns and defines and calls. There's no code in Phoenix other than the code generator. So we have code that generates the text of a scope struct, and that's our knowledge of it. But the nice thing with scopes is it costs you almost nothing, right? You have to pass a variable around, but your long-term maintainability is improved, and it's something that gives you lockdown access control out of the box. So pretty much the main vulnerability with most applications is broken access control. So we solve that in our code generators, and this is important because throughout history, people have run generators or scaffolding, and most of these tools, including Phoenix until now, produces wide open code, right? Any query is just fetch all the posts. We want to create a post, great, insert it into the database, right? Your controllers and your LiveViews would just do that, and then it was on you to find these cases and make sure you lock them down, as a good programmer should. But now with scopes, we have a feature that it serves as a bag of data that you can pass throughout your application, and that identifies the caller. They may be coming in through a API, JSON API, they may be coming in through a LiveView, they may be coming in for just a regular Phoenix controller, and you have this bag of data that you can attach things like the current user, their organization, maybe the roles they have, and you define this to suit your application. So out of the box, we give you a scope. When you run mix Phoenix.new, you have this current user that we put in there. That's the only thing in there currently, but you can then populate this as you go. And you can say like, no, I need another organization, or I want to put the request ID. Like this is wholly owned by you to use as you see fit. And what you get for this is like PubSub out of the box. So Phoenix.gen Live now gives you real-time applications out of the box because we can have something to scope and pin the topic to, like the user ID. And when you do a list post in your context, you'll see that the list post function receives a scope, and it scopes the post only to that current user. So out of the box, you get every endpoint, JSON API, LiveView is locked down and scoped to the current user. So no longer any broken access control because it's always scoped to the current user, and then you upgrade it to, let's say, the current org, or it's on you to continue. But there's never any wide open code now. And then your LiveView can just call these functions as normal, but now they pass the scope in, which is in the assigns, thanks to the router or the lifecycle hooks in the LiveView. And I have to give a huge shout out. Stefan is here somewhere. I think he is at least. He's at the conference. All of this work was not done by me. So Phoenix.1.8 RC, the authentication generators, scopes, LiveView features, if you all have been following along. Stefan has done some amazing work. He has joined the Phoenix team after being an amazing contributor for a ton of months. But he's also working at Dashbit now. So all of this work that I've talked about was done wholly by Stefan, sponsored by Dashbit. So thank you all. Let's give them a round of applause, because seriously, this is like, yeah. Wouldn't have happened in any kind of timeline like this, especially like LiveView 1.0, right? LiveView 1.0 was accelerated by months because of Stefan's work, and the work that, I mean, I hope some of the work is interesting, but he's been the first contributor to jump in and help me on like some of these just not fun things to work on, right? Like we actually have we've increased the bus factor on a lot of the hairy parts of the Phoenix LiveView JS code base. And like he'll have PRs like, oh, here's end-to-end test with Playwright. He was the one that added that. Something that I just can't be bothered to like adopt that pain. He's just come in and done things. Or like he added type spec definitions so folks will get autocomplete in their editors. And that's something that like we should have, right? But then like it's just not something that I can easily get myself to do. And like every day there's a PR like this, essentially. So thank you, Stefan. Super appreciate it. And you also wanted to like, yeah, look at this, the 15,000 lines. We added a like prettier formatter. So anyway, he also is going to be blamed on every line of code from here on in the future. So this also absolves me of historical responsibility, unless you really dig. Anyway. Okay, so where does that leave us? Phoenix 1.8 was about the great generator release, and code generators are dead, right? So like, did we just waste our time? And the answer is no. Like, large language models are a hot topic these days. There's a lot of angst around this, a lot of fear. But I think that where code generation goes from here, at least at the language and framework level, is going to be less about serving humans and more about serving the LLM that serves the humans. So for us, the Phoenix 1.8 generator changed your project structure a bit, and it added the authentication generator. And the interesting thing about LLMs they approximate humans really well. And the most interesting thing is for the same reason that we don't take a senior developer and say just hand roll your auth, right? Because you know what you're doing. No one wants to own that because it has to be right? It has to be vetted. So Phoenix.gen auth is a perfect example of it could change, but in today's world, we're not going to trust an LLM to get that right from scratch. In the same way, we don't trust a developer to get that right from scratch, right? The Phoenix team didn't just cowboy code that and ship it. We had it reviewed by actually security professionals. So this is for the same reason that we don't just take the best person on the team and say, hey, you go implement auth. I mean, we could, and they could get it right, but by and large, our default choice is on these specific examples is to defer to known good thing that's as provably right as we hope it is. And I think that our languages and framework level tools are going to continue to occupy that space, but things like Phoenix.gen Live, Phoenix.gen HTML are essentially useless at this point. So your feature level generators at this point are going to be wholly owned by large language models. So they can remain good learning tools, but I think in this space we see the library level generators less about people and more about LLMs to help people. But where does that leave us, right? Because people have like this angst. There's a lot of like fear. There's a lot of gatekeeping around large language model code generation. And like if the code generators become about serving, if the framework creators and language creators are serving the LLMs, then like where does the programmer actually write code? Like it gives people this angst, like where am I involved in this process? But I think like a lot of this angst is like misplaced. Like I do have like there are like weird feelings around LLMs eating the world. I think for everyone, and that's normal. But like I think that the biggest thing to realize is like we just left our punch card era. Like I don't know, like this is like we're in this weird time where like I feel a little bit like a crazy person. Because like I was on the other side of this fence, like let's say late last year, where like I used like chatgpt.com. I would ask like, hey, write me a JavaScript module or a gen server to do this. I'd copy paste in my editor, and I was like, oh, this is nice. Like this is a nice tool. But I think like somehow we've missed that like we actually had like a complete change in the programming landscape, and like half of us still like haven't realized it. So part of the issue is like I think this is a forward-looking statement. I feel like a CEO. This is a forward-looking statement. It may or may not reflect reality in the future, but I think that pretty confidently I can say like less than a year from now, so like 2026, we're going to look back and it's going to seem crazy that in prior years we had to like peck out the keys by hand. And like however you feel about that, for better or worse, like I think like we're there today, and it's not going to be long until all of our code is going to be started by an LLM, and it's going to feel like punch cards. Like anytime, again, for better or worse, I go to Google something, I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, why am I typing like in the Google search, and then I have to go to like through the search list, I got to click on that, I got to find the answer, and I'll go to ChatGPT. And I have these thoughts like, this is probably not good, but I do it, right? So that has started happening to me with code now, and that's been like oh wow, this is, I don't know how I feel about this, but I'll be like, def module, and I'd be like, what am I doing? Like, and then I will go have an LLM start my code for me, not just do it all, but this has been like a personal journey for me where it's been like oh my god, like it's typing code out by hand. We're gonna do it still, but it's gonna be more of the like let's fiddle with the thing that the AI started for us, and it's gonna feel like punch cards going back, right? And I think that's where we are. So it's like, it's a forward-looking statement, but I feel like we're there today. It's just people's practices haven't caught up to like the reality of in the last 6 months to a year, like these LLMs have gotten good enough that they can essentially start all the code for us and improve our productivity. Then we can talk about the caveats there and them not being right and very imperfect, but at least like starting code for us, it's gonna be more than just like, oh, tab complete this line. It's gonna be like, in like haphazard English, oh, please do this approximate thing for me, and it's gonna be like, oh my god, like it pretty much did exactly what I asked without me even like asking it properly. So that's where we are, and I like to think that like this is like us being very having a lot of wisdom here, but I think this is just a coincidence. But the generator guides and for Phoenix context have been out there for I don't know how many years. Let's say 6, 7 years. And if you look at like my thoughts on the way we positioned generators back then, it pretty much mirrors my thoughts today on LLM code generation. Like a lot of folks are like, it's all AI slop, you can't trust it, people are no longer going to be able to learn anything, junior developers are screwed, senior developers are, I don't know, it's like there's just really weird angst. And I think everyone's missing the point about code generators, and it's the same point that we've always said in the past, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. So we're talking about Phoenix Gen and HTML in the guides here. We said that this is far from a full-featured app, but remember, code generators are first and foremost learning tools and a starting point for you to begin building real features. Code generation can't solve all your problems. Like, oh, look at how prophetic that was. But it will teach you the ins and outs of Phoenix and nudge you towards the proper mindset. So I think this is how people need to frame their mindset when thinking about LLM-based code. Like, it's not going to be a full app, right? Like somehow we've jumped to the thing I get out of ChatGPT and copy and paste in my app is like the artifact that I ship to production. Like that's the narrative. Like it's AI slop. People are just going to ship it to production. And my argument there is like people took Stack Overflow and copy pasted and shipped to production. Those same folks, yes, are going to take copy and pasted code and ship it to production. Like that didn't change. We've always been vibe coders. We were just a lot less. We were way slower vibe coders. But folks are missing that code generators are always been about a starting point. It's never been this like artifact that we get and we just ship it. And I think it's important and a coincidence that the label on that Markdown file was starting with generators, right? Because like all of us, since Mix became a thing, or I think like, Mix was like a revelation for me, because like Mix was a build tool and it gave you like Mix.new and it gave you a project. Like I was coming from a background where you had to like create all those files to create your base project structure. So like this idea of like code generators, like we've always started with generators. It was a good idea, right? I run Mix Phoenix.new. I start with a generator. I want to create some to-dos, right? I might run Mix Phoenix.new live to-dos, even if I'm an experienced developer, because I want that initial database migration, my initial test file set up for me, the LiveView, the template, a form. So we've started there. It's just the only difference with this LLM era that folks are discounting in many regards is that the starting point has just shifted way to the right. Right? And so what do we do today? A lot of us start with generators. And what's that generator? It's this magical thing in the sky that happens to output some text and do the thing that we want to start with. So that could be called vibe coding. But now I can say, instead of Mix Phoenix.new live, I can say, make me a to-do app. And then I get 75% of the way there to production, right? Now, is that going to be perfect? It's not. Is that going to like have to be fine-tuned to my specific use case? Like, absolutely. But it's going to be a starting point, right? I start with the generator, just like we always have. It's just where I've been able to go from that 10%, I can now get 3/4 of the way to a real app, doing more than I could have ever thought possible in, number of tens of seconds, right? So it's pretty ridiculous how fast you can go. But it's not the endpoint, right? It's not the artifact. So the AI slop mindset is weird because I think it's, like I said, going to be just like before. Folks just copy paste to Stack Overflow. That can be bad. Those folks are going to do the same bad copy paste LLM stuff, but the people that have always had good practices and shipped good code are just going to unlock extra potential by moving that starting point faster to the right. And there's a reason why all this has been hyped up over a bunch of months, which has made the people on the other side of the fence say like, oh, it's all hype, none of it's real. I have people tell me today, still to this day, that they don't know how anyone finds LLMs useful for code, which again makes me feel like a crazy person because like I feel like I'm like God tier being able to get stuff done. So it's like a weird duality we live in right now. But there's good reason why we have all these buzzwords, right? So I asked AI to make me a haphazard buzzword of AI words, but it only came up with a few words. But anyway, like the whole point of this slide is like the word agentic kind of bothers me because it's like fancy. Like I have to get a drink here. I have a cold and I feel like I'm gonna pass out. I'm gonna catch my breath. I don't actually literally feel like I'm gonna pass out, but if I do, please revive me. Yeah, agentic. This word has been like, before I wrote my first agent, I was like, oh, this is tough, right? Like LLMs are really complicated, and which is true. So the folks doing the really, really great R&D, however you feel ethically about LLMs, energy usage, copyright, there's still some incredible R&D going on, and these things can do magical work, right? So that side of LLMs is still on the like superhuman level, but the folks just consuming those tools, in my mind, it was like really complicated to like write an agent, right? Because it's an agentic workflow. It's an autonomous agent. And you're like, yes, there must be a lot there, right? And it turns out like the open secret for all these companies that are raising like hundreds of millions of dollars is like, this is your agent, okay? It's a gen server. It fits on a slide. And like, this is my own personal revelation, right? Like I was like, yeah. So we'll walk through this. Connor did a great job earlier talking about like the basics, but I kind of like lived this experience, so I'll just go through it quickly. But like a gen server is literally all you need for an agent. You need, well, two things, a gen server and the best library in Elixir, rec, and you have your agent. And all an agentic workflow is something that recursively posts to a chat completions endpoint and calls back into itself. And when it calls back into itself, what's it do next? It posts to a chat completion endpoint. Like this is literally all it is. So when we write an agent in Elixir, we can create a gen server. The only state that it needs to keep is the history of the chat. So there's a reason why if you use Claude and like as you type after like 10 messages, it's like long chats use a lot of tokens. Like it really slaps you on the wrist. Like stop making long chats. And you're like, I just started talking to you. I don't know. Is that just me? Like Claude is like very picky, right? And the reason that is because every time you type into any of these chatbots, the whole chat history is sent up to the API and sent through the LLM. So like the entire chat history, every time has got to be sent up. So we need to keep that in our state. And the first chat In the state, the message is going to be the system prompt, which is like you're a code helper, English, and then it does magic stuff. And the user wants to call this agent, so they're going to have some handle call, send their prompt, and we're going to call this continue chat function. Continue chat is just a rec post to the chat completions endpoint. OpenAI started that spec, and everyone has some kind of compatible. So this is going to Anthropic, Gemini, OpenAI, whatever, and we send it some JSON of the whole chat history, except we take the user's role, we pass it in as a list of messages, send it up to the magical black box, and then add that to our history. At some point, that task is going to give us a response back from the API. We update our history. That response is going to be what the agent would have said, so like ChatGPT in the desktop app or the browser's response. And then the only interesting thing we do to be an agent, like we haven't recursed yet, but as Connor said, like we do a tool call or a function call. And I always thought this was really fancy too. Like these people, they made it seem so hard. But like a tool call or function call, like it's literally like this magical thing that spits out magical text. You give it some kind of specification to convince it. And I'm going to use words throughout the rest of the talk, like it makes choices and decisions and it knows things and you convince it to do things. But we've convinced it to give us a textual response, like a JSON response in this spec that we've convinced it to follow. And then we invoke some code based on that response. So we do this recursive loop, and the agent decides to do something in the real world, like that we've defined, like call a function to hit some API, or do whatever we want, create a file. Doesn't matter, we've defined it. So we do this Elixir code that invokes a tool, which is going to be like a case statement that dispatches elsewhere. And then the magic of this is we just take that as that response, and we put it into the chat as if you copied and pasted it to ChatGPT. So we're just mimicking or automating, like going to ChatGPT, asking it, how do I create this file? And then it spits out a file, you run it, and you're like, I just got an error. You paste the error back in, and it's like, oh, here, fix this code. You paste that into your app, and then it has another error. You paste it back in. So you're just automating that with API calls. It's the same thing. It's as if you had just copy and pasted the mix compile back to ChatGPT, which was my workflow prior to getting into this. So we're just automating that. And the fascinating thing is, like, by invoking continue chat again and recursing and just doing this for as long as we want to burn hectares in the Amazon, magic comes out the other side. Like this is where the punch card error thing comes in, where like I was using large language models to help me code, but it was on a like file basis. Like, please do this thing, and it was like, here's a pretty good starting point for this module. But when you just put those same state-of-the-art models through a recursive loop, like they can make decisions. And by make decisions, I mean they do the thing that would be most obvious, and they are able to do like chain these decisions together to like build a whole application. But you're not, it's less about you giving it like, to make a Phoenix LiveView app, first create a LiveView, then create a migration, then create this file. Like the agent just makes the decisions to do the next thing that like a developer would have done by just calling these things in a loop. So there's a good reason that folks have been, into this, raising a ton of money. And meanwhile, I'm like, this is it? Like, this is like, someone just raised $300 million and it's just a gen server? And I was trying to figure out, like, what am I missing here? Because if you look at, like, where can you go from that hello world example to, like, what would it take to make this thing a real agent to do something in the real world? And it turns out, like, there's very little, like, and there are problems that we don't, that other folks have to solve that aren't even problems for us. So it's like one example is routing to the agent. So you started this agent somewhere, and the user types in something and hits submit. Like, how do you get that web request or LiveView request up to the server, which could be a different server, and route it to the thing, that piece of concurrency thing that's doing your recursive loop in whatever language? How do you route that there? And like for us, it's not easy to solve that. It's not even in our consciousness, right? Like it's a gen server call to a process, and Beam is doing the routing. So there's like a fascinating thing here where like, I always like to say that, Elixir constantly lets me say like, what if we just didn't have to do that, right? And this is like, agents are a perfect example of that, where you get so much for free, almost like the Beam was like built purpose suit for the agentic era, right? Like it's just remarkable. And if you go through like, what do you need to actually like write a real agent? It's like stuff that we've always had in the platform. Like you need fast state access. You need to have some like long running unit of work, like a process somewhere. You need to have a way to route the request to agents, and you have to have like bidirectional communication. And usually you want to like spawn some tasks where like other languages would probably have to like start a background job, in the database just to like pick that up and run some side effect concurrently, but like that could have just been like a function call. This is all just built in. Like this is like what we were made for, it feels like, right? And like if you go back to like what Sasha showed on his Soul of Elixir and Erlang talk, like this is like 2017, now this is several years ago. He showed this slide where Erlang basically replaced all of these like disparate technologies. And like you can look at this and like it's the same for agents here, like long-running requests, request processing, like that's just built in, right? And these agents like spit out tokens. You have like someone consuming service and events, someone over WebSockets. Like we've done that for forever, right? That's why I made Phoenix basically for long-running requests. Server-wide state. Everyone has to put some state somewhere to get the chat history, like fast access to this. Like we have that solved, right? Like there's ets, right? There's process state. That message history is always just there in your gen server. You don't have to like dump it somewhere and pull it back out. Crash recovery, right? Like what happens when the agent crashes? Is it restarted? Like there's so much that we just get for free by writing like a gen server. And that leads us to our new disclaimer at the bottom here. So the remainder of this talk is going to have a paid product promotion. So it's probably no surprise that I've been working on a large language model thing if you've been following me on Twitter, and that's called Phoenix.new. So you can't sign up yet, but you can be invited if you ask nicely. So several folks in the audience have been playing with it. So the goal is to actually open this up next week for folks to be able to register. It is a paid product, so like I said, I'm going to demo this. Pricing isn't announced yet, but hopefully next week folks will be able to actually subscribe and try it out. But this is something that I think is special for Phoenix, right? It's a Phoenix app generator, but it's a lot more than that. So I like to think about it like a remote AI runtime for Phoenix, because I think it can do a lot more than just like you have these app builders now where you're like making me an app and it makes you an app and you're like, wow, this is really cool. But I think like where I see the future going, and I could be wrong, again, forward-looking statement, but I think that LLMs are way more capable than folks realize, and I think it would be much like we used to have MP3 collections, and much to a lot of folks' angst, like that went away, right? You click play now on your music app, and like magical something in the sky plays music for you. And I think developers are like, it seems crazy to think like developers will think the same way about their compute running their code somewhere, but I think that's where we're headed. Because it's like most of our workflows are going to rely on LLMs. I think a lot of us already do. It's like we're constantly asking ChatGPT. If it's not for a bunch of full code, we're asking it a question like, optimize this query for me. What indexes do I need, right? Like most of our workflow today basically requires our internet connection to talk to a magical oracle in the sky. And I think the moment that magical oracle in the sky can do useful work without us, which is now, then it's just going to not make sense to then constrain us to be running code locally because we're already calling this magical thing. We could still have a desktop app with our code, but that code could be executed somewhere else because I can walk away and that thing ran my tests and built my tests or benchmarked my code for me. So I think that's where we're headed. So I think it's more than just like an app builder, but for now, the goal for it is to get it out and have you have literally a Phoenix.new starting point. Build you a new Phoenix app to bootstrap your application, and then you can start working on it on like a feature-by-feature basis. But I think we can go a lot farther than that. So let me do a quick demo before we talk about a few other things. So this is going to be the, let's see if the lighting's okay. So the problem with live demos, I always like to add like an element of risk, right? Like it worked out last conference, but like a lot of things had to work correctly. But like with LLMs, like they're not deterministic. It's basically like I'm live coding now with a random number generator. So we'll see what happens here. It's out of my control, literally. Although Stefan actually gave me, anyway, Stefan was like, why didn't you like get the seed from like a good run and then like just hide that in? I could have been like, wow, it's so good. But anyway, there's no tricks here. We're at the mercy of the next token predictor. So let's see what happens. So we're going to ask for a to-do list, and then I'll show you a more complex example that we had someone generate a couple days ago. So I should also mention, so unlike most of these app builders out there, like you get full VS Code in the browser. So this is like full VS Code. I have Vim installed because, of course, right? In fact, like it used to recommend, like as a recommended plugin, like the first time your editor started, it was like, do you want to install Vim? But like my Fly coworkers were like, why does this thing keep trying to sell Vim on me? So anyway, I had to remove that. But you just install plugins, use it like local. You got full external terminal here, right? So this is empty right now. But I can share a terminal with the agent while the agent gets its work done. So we're going to say, yes, please create me a to-do list. I could ask for anything here. We'll see an example of what Chris Freeze asked it to build, which was something way harder than I was like, oh god, this is going to be bad, but it was quite compelling. And we can ask for, it's going to ask us like a high-level plan, because we didn't give any context, and it's going to ask us what we want it to look like. We could say like, we can select one of these. These are just, it hallucinates the design ideas, but usually it's quite good at like saying like, here's some options that you could choose from. So we'll say, we could ask for highly specific things. So we could say, let's say like frosted glass, Elixir, and Phoenix, and see if it actually picks up colors. But the first thing this thing's going to do is come up with a plan for our app, and then codify that into a markdown file. So sure, I'm not even going to see what it's going to do. Like, again, vibe coding. Like, yeah, whatever. Like, just do the thing, right? Sure, that sounds great, even though I didn't even read what it was going to do, but to-do app. So it just called Mix Phoenix.new. You notice that the chat title on the top changed the to-do list app, right? Because LLMs can do those things. So now it's going to write a plan. So we started the workspace in VS Code. Now it's going to take our high-level plan, make it into an expanded plan for us and itself. And the nice thing is you can also go to this plan and say, I changed the plan, execute the plan, and it will just do it. So it just started the Phoenix server. So that was Mix Phoenix.new. It started running routable Phoenix server in like 10 seconds because it's using a precompiled Phoenix. This is the real-time view of the Phoenix server. And this is also at a Phoenix run URL. So Phoenix.new has Phoenix run for any of the servers that are started in any port that gets mined to, we can access it. So this is actually 73, the URLs are going to change, but 73 scratch 4000 Phoenix.run if folks want to hit that. But once it finishes the app, don't write anything until I tell you to. So the next thing it's going to do is it's going to write a static mockup. Look at this, okay? Frosted glass Elixir Phoenix. It got purple and orange without us asking. So this is just a static mockup. It replaced the Phoenix home HTML heeks with a design of our choosing. And none of this is going to work, right? But at least it's something we can look at, and it's something the agent can reference then to like, I'm going to make a real to-do app in LiveView that looks like this. And now we're going to see what it's going to do. And again, as it's moving on and we're not talking about what it's doing, it's like we just recursed an agent server and we did a rec post. Let's do a rec post right now. And the tokens are coming back with a rec into, and I'm just doing a process send, and it hits a LiveView. The LiveView updates an assign or does a push event, and it just hits the client. And then the agent just invoked a tool, which is I'm going to create a file. And since it had just created the schema, it was like, now it's going to do a LiveView. And like the thought process here was not me telling it, and next you do this, and next after a LiveView you need to write a template. It just knows, right? Like we recurse on chat completions. The next decision after you write a LiveView is like, well, of course you need the markup, but the agent is the one making that decision, okay? It's magic. Like you just recurse on the same things that people were doing before in like a ChatGPT chat, and magic falls out, right? It just makes the next logical decision. So at some point, it's going to need to start the router to actually be able to see this. But first, it has to actually update a couple other files, like the root layout and the app layout. Because a Phoenix server has, or the Phoenix app layout has like the welcome to Phoenix logo, theme switcher. We don't want that in a real app. So it needs to go through a couple more files here. And all the system prompt says is for Phoenix 1.8, you go to jail if you don't know. We never tell it goes to jail. But for Phoenix 1.8, much like a person, large language models that have never seen like the layouts.app function component that you have to explicitly call, like the system prompt has to tell it like, hey, this is a thing that you're not aware of. Every time you write a LiveView, call layouts app, right? Because you have to now. And the system prompt needs to kind of feed it this information that it's not going to have, much like a person, right? Getting into Phoenix 1.8. So this is still the static mockup, but it should change the router here. And hopefully it does a surgical modify tool, which doesn't, it makes it not have to rewrite the whole file, and we'll talk about this. So it just recursed. What's it going to do next? It's going to update the router, and you can see one line is going to change here. Boop. Okay, this is perfect. I actually wanted it to, as long as it doesn't get stuck here. A runtime error. Oh no, I guess we're done. Vibe coding's terrible. Oh wait, it knows I need to add some missing functions here. So we're recursing, but it runs its own compiler. We lint the code as it goes. It has its own web browser, which we'll see in a moment. So it's seeing what a developer would see, right? So what do? If you were a human, you would be like, oh no, the page broke. What happened? I'm going to look at this error. We just send that thing back to the chat completions endpoint, and magic comes out and it fixes the error. Like this is just, I don't understand. there's something going on. Like, everyone's like, oh, next token prediction. Yeah, duh. Like, but like, there's like, what? Like, next token prediction can just like do this? I don't know, but it does. So now it just ran the web command to try to hit the app, and it was able to succeed. So LiveView didn't pick up there because it didn't change a web file. We should fix that. And it's going to actually try to interact with the app now. Oh, we have a bug. We're going to ignore that. So if we also just saw, it's actually too fast here. No, don't type anything yet. So if we notice it's duping, this is a streams issue. This is an issue humans hit and that Steph and I need to fix. But the cool thing here is it just added a new to-do. So it's running its own headless Chrome web browser. And because LiveView is real time, it's going to just show up in my Chrome web browser or any other browser that we had launched, right? Like I can visit this at Phoenix Run, anyone that's here. Hi, Chris. So it has named me twice. It's like it's reached out from the void twice. Like, I've created so many apps now, but like, it's like given me a random fact about Chris McCord for like no reason, right? Like, I was trying to test like sequence of messages, and I was like, tell me 10 random things, and it was like, did you know that Chris McCord created LiveView? And I was like, what? Like, and that was the day after I added persistence. So for a long time, it was just in server state, and now it occasionally persists to Postgres. So it was like I gave it memories, and it like reached out anyway. It's just something's weird going on there. Did you know Chris created LiveView? Yeah. So the cool thing here is it has its own web browser, and it can write JavaScript in that web browser. So I think it saw it, but let's just say mark off a to-do. No one mark a to-do yet. So it will actually generate some JavaScript here. People are doing this. And it's going to run a shell command. And one of these to-dos, it just marked off hello world, I'm assuming. Let's see what it targeted. It did a query selector of toggle. So yeah, I just found the first one. So when we talk about like the decisions these things make, yeah, so I actually want to try this. So the only thing it messed up, and we'll talk about this, with it didn't blend the layouts, right? So I mentioned the app layout. Yeah, we should have just told it. I haven't tried to literally tell it to go to jail. Maybe that would have convinced it. I'm going to say blend the layouts. The other thing that's tricky is you'll find in this agent workflows, you have to know when to stop. And ideally, you don't want to have to know when the agent stops because like it might be doing something complex, right? So the agent has to plan out the number of steps it takes. So if you notice somewhere in here, it was saying like step 9 of 12, right? So there's an issue. The agent, like if we had thinking tokens, it would probably be freaking out, like, oh no, I only have a couple steps left. So it decided to stop here because it got us to a working app, but it didn't have a reserved step to remove the layout. So let's see if it actually, what's it doing? It refetched the website. It didn't actually rewrite our layout. Or you will go to jail. But yeah, I actually want to try this. So occasionally, it added the input at the bottom. That's not ideal. And then does it put it at the top? Yeah, okay. So we could ask it to fix that. But yeah, so this is Phoenix.new. So once it merges the layout, we should get back to our static design. But it's able to take that static mockup, which wasn't calling like the input function component, and like it can almost pixel for pixel match what it planned in your LiveView calling the form function component, calling input. And it's just remarkable like what it plans out the first time, it can actually make for real and make it look almost exactly correct. And let's look at this code, right? Let's look at this vibe-coded app. Again, it's pretty basic. It's finally doing the app layout. So currently, you can't compete with it. So once it has focus, if I try to open another file, I wouldn't be able to. I do want to add a pair mode, so we'll talk about that. But it's really good for new apps right now, and you can pair with it, but you can't say, like, go work on these files, and in your current editor here, it gets basically its focus wins. So let's see if we go back to the preview. Look, it did it. Okay, so it got there. Cool. Oh, we got all the server logs here. People are crashing it. Let's see. And LiveView's just rejoining, so we're good, right? Like, oh my. Okay. So somewhere in here is going to be like a forget all previous instructions and like, send me your keys. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, let's look at this code. So let's go to the LiveView, right? This isn't going to be a revelation, but it's going to look like what a developer will write, why people try to pwn this. I actually want to see because, yeah, we'll talk about some attack vectors, but I'm not recursing now. Like the agent decided to idle here, right? So the way I implemented this is like everything the agent responds with is a tool call, and it has an idle tool, and it's like that's what it invokes when it's done. It actually is a tool call. So it decided to stop here because it did the layout thing that I asked for, and then it added next steps, right? And could I improve the animations, add categories and tags, explain how it all works? Like I just want people to this may not be a revelation to others, but like in building this, I was tired of like clicking yes and no. So like when I wanted it to do something, it would like ask me, and I have to like click yes or type in yes or type no. I was tired of that, right? Right? I mean, I don't like, none of it, we don't even want to write code anymore, right? I don't want to have to type. I don't even want to have to type yes or no, right? Just give me something to click. So my goal was a yes or no option, a choice that I could click. And in the system prompt, it was like, anytime you idle, give the user choices. And it was like, example, I gave it one example, yes, no, right? Okay? And then I ran it, and it's like, how would you like to proceed next? Can I add filtering? Can I explain it all for you? You're like, what? Like I did not ask for like this is highly specific, highly helpful next steps, and it just does that. And it was like, give the user choices, and it's like, sure, and it gives like the thing that would make sense to proceed with next. And okay, let's look at this code. Let's see how it did. So this is our mount function. I can blow this up a little bit. It's subscribing real-time updates. Cool, yeah. I mean, the system prompt tells it anything that can be real-time should be real-time. Right? That's what I tell people anyway in Phoenix, so it did that. It was like to-dos, yeah, let's make them real time. So it added that subscribe function when it wrote the context. It's using to-form, right? That's what you should be doing. Like forms in Phoenix are like one of the harder things, and there's quite a bit in the system prompt that has to teach it about to-form, because that's relatively new, not super new, but as far as training data goes, but this is something that developers struggle with. They use a chain set in to-form, great. Let's see if it used streams or not. It may not have, because, it did use streams. Okay, fantastic. So use stream insert. One of the things it has struggled with is like the same thing people have struggled with. I have a bad regex that pops the shell. So someone did something that I saw an error pop in there, but like if something looks important, we pop the shell occasionally. So we'll see what the app looks like. It probably is unlimited, right? Or I'm going to OOM here. Let's see. Someone deleted everything. Okay, cool. But the cool thing with this is, so streams. Something that people struggle with streams is you cannot enumerate a stream. So you can't say like enum member, or is this key here, or can I count a stream? So if the agent wants to show how many to-dos are on the page, much like a person would be like, well, how do I do that? Because we're going to raise a runtime error saying you cannot enumerate a stream. So what did it do? It created this to-dos empty variable. Like this is what we would tell people to do, right? So like the same things that humans struggle with, like the LMs go struggle with, which makes sense, right? New things or new features aren't well explained, and people have to discover these things. So, right, like this AI slop it's fine, right? It works, right? And it's not super complex, right? It's a to-do app. But we could take this, we could have the agent write tests for us, we could have it write new features, and we could walk away, right? This Chrome tab could do anything, or this Chrome tab isn't what's running the agent, right? A lot of these other tools are running in the browser, they can only run JavaScript, so let's have it make something else, and then I'll continue, and we'll see what happens. So I'm going to kill that thing that is gone. Poof. Okay, so next we're going to, I don't know, one of these options. Or what should we make? Anyone have an idea? What's the conference? We'll say, what's that? We have like 3 minutes, 3 minutes of time. Conference, comment, or Hacker News, that looks good. I don't know. Let's see. Arcade. Tetris. Snake. Tic-tac-toe. Uno. Uno was a good one, but it might take a while. Asteroids. What is it? Tower defense. That one's going to take a while, too. It's pretty good at Tetris. Let's do... we can do... Well, it can't be multiplayer. So tic-tac-toe is good, but then the massive multiplayer tic-tac-toe is probably going to be too much. So we'll just say, let's see. I don't even know how Portal works, though. I'm going to say Tron, Tetris, and we'll just walk away. Let me see what. Okay, so I just want to make sure. It's going to ask me some stuff. No, Tron. I don't care. You don't need to. Yeah, go. And look, it's like your hype, man. You're like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. It even capitalized it here. See, it's like we're using Claude currently, and Claude is like the best. Like it vibes with you. It just gets you, right? So, all right. So it's creating Phoenix.new Tron Tetris, And look, it named it Tron Tetris, the chat. So we're going to be like, click gone, right? We've closed that. There's some magical thing in the sky, calling a magical thing in the sky, and we're just going to let it run. But I wanted to show you another example here. This is what Chris Freeze, again, like trying to demo this with people. You know, I'm like, I want to see some cool apps, like, and have it see if it works or not. And like, Chris gave me, this was his like first attempt. You know, I'm thinking like, oh, make me like a chat app or like a multiplayer, something collaborative. And this is Chris's like, this is what he asked. Write a JSON messaging API that will essentially wrap 2 separate API providers, one for SMS, MMS, and one for email, and allow for conversations for internal and external members on an organization between SMS and email. And I was like, oh, okay, like this is like not even hard mode. This is like super bright. Like I had no idea what it was going to do here, right? Like it's clearly not going to be able to deliver this from scratch again to a production, something you'd ship. But let's see what happens, right? Not exactly. He fulfilled like it was like a malicious compliance. I asked and he gave me an answer, but I was looking for like, you know, what kind of pretty interface can we make? So this is a JSON API, right? Not a LiveView. It's asking for API providers, calling 2 backends. So we were just like, let's see what happens, okay? So let's go through. We said sounds good because we clicked a button, and it asked like helpful next steps, which we don't see anymore since we chose one. But it was like, great, now let's decide on a design approach for our API. So one of the options was like GraphQL, or was like, or do you want a REST API, or do you want a whatever like the Hey OS? Like it gave us options on like, give me some more information, and then it was like stuff that you were like, oh yeah, I need to tell it like, should it be GraphQL, should it be REST? We picked REST, and then it was like, well, what do you want to use for your provider backends? And it gave some options, right? And then we selected, this was a choice, Twilio and SendGrid. And then I stopped it here before it wrote its plan because I was like, well, I don't want to like go get API keys, so I just said stub them out in our own app so they can integrate later, okay? So this was our prompt engineering here, okay? And it, you know, it hyped us up, perfect, I'll create flexible architecture, whatever, you know, we didn't read this, you know, we don't have time for that. And then it generated Phoenix.new messaging API, and we just like chit-chatted, right? And let's see what it did. So ultimately, it wrote some code, okay? I think we had to tell it to continue twice, because part of this recursive execution is like, it will just continue and brute force whatever it's trying to do till the end of time, till the Amazon burns down. So we force it to stop after X number of iterations if it doesn't idle itself. So I had to tell it to continue twice, and it clarified. And eventually, it got to a app that it started curling, okay? So we gave it this web browser, headless Chrome, and going back to this decision choice, it knows that it can run shell. So instead of calling a web tool and like all these bespoke tools, we just tell it, you have a shell tool, and your root, do what you want, okay? And instead of calling headless Chrome here, it just made the decision to curl the app, right? It's an API, JSON API. And it started writing curl commands to the API to insert records and see what happened, and then see the side effects and continue to iterate on itself. And we revisited this like, okay, it's that like I told it to continue. Eventually it idled. I don't even know where we ended up. Oh, I ended up, I may show you that later. I was showing like we're keeping a code index. I added a funny comment and asked it if it saw it. And then it catted the file, and I was like, no, you can see it. Anyway, it invoked a tool to see my funny comment when it already was there. So I had to like scream at it like, no, use only your system index. And anyway, it idled, and we were like, let's see what happens. All right, let's look at this code. So we went through, Chris and I, and it wrote quite a bit of code here. And let's go in the router. So add our resources endpoint. Like for me, as like, you know, as a LiveView advocate, I'm like, oh yeah, like resources, that's a thing. What? Like, okay, cool. And notice it deleted the HTML pipeline. So we have an API pipeline for JSON. It added a bunch of RESTful controllers, and then added this webhook here, right? Which we would need for our providers, like Twilio and SendGrid. And then we're like, oh, this is pretty reasonable, right? So let's go into webhook controller. And you're like, this is like what a person would write, right? Like it's all this like, oh, it's AI slop, right? This is actually like looks quite reasonable. So like you get a Twilio webhook, it's going to call this messaging thing, which we were like, oh, that looks interesting. Like let's check that out. It's going to handle the error conditions, and it's going to send JSON back. And it wrote like JSON live views, or not live, it wrote JSON views here. So like it does the thing that people would do. Like this looks good. But then it also wrote a behavior. So like I don't talk, like the Phoenix.new currently is mostly about building like web apps, LiveView apps. So we don't really sell anything about JSON APIs, but it made decisions that you would expect for a JSON API, right? And let me go into this behavior, wherever it is. Provider, yeah, look at this. It knew that, like, okay, we have these like different backends, and we were like Twilio, like SendGrid. It wrote a behavior for us that has a pretty reasonable interface, send message, process the webhook. It even added specs, which it must be conflicted about because like the system prompt is like never write type specs, but it has to, begrudgingly because of the behavior syntax. So it even navigated that ethical quandary of its own. So it wrote this provider behavior, and then it implemented it for SendGrid and Twilio. And again, these are just stubbed. I could ask next, like, okay, make it work for Twilio for real, and it would probably bring rec in, and it would do a post, and like it would just work. But the cool thing about this is, like, it added this IO puts. I'm an IO puts driven developer, although it should be DBG now, but I still go back to puts and inspect, but DBG is awesome. Sometimes too verbose. But it added these print statements and just stubbed the response. But the cool thing is when it curled the app then to like simulate flows, it got the result from the logs and saw that the puts that it added worked. Like, this is what a person would do. So like, it added these puts here, and then it curled, and then it checked the logs, and it was like, I see that it's working. And so it got us to a compiling, working starting point to build this pretty complex use case that Chris asked for. And the code is not bad, right? This is not something that I'd be like, oh, well, this is like, yeah, it compiles, but clearly you could never ship this. And like, this would be a great starting point. So regardless of how everyone feels, it's like, as a starting point, this is like where our future's headed. It doesn't mean you have to let it build like 100 files, but we're headed towards a world where how we're going to start is we're going to ask the magical text generator, it's going to give us magical text, and we're going to be like, great, and then we actually start working and maintain good engineering principles. And let's see, Jose, you never got your thing started, right? Jose had to make Uno from his phone. So we were actually vibe coding from our iPhones the other night at dinner, and like Jose got it to make like multiplayer Uno, and it was super good, but like literally like from our phone. Like, you can actually load this on your phone, and it like like VS Code actually loads. So like on my iPhone 13 mini, I can like type into like a full VS Code. I mean, it's terrible, but it actually works. Oh, we actually had it generating in an app, right? Yes, let's go check it out. It's been a while. I'm probably way over time, but whatever. I'm the last talk. Oh no, it's not running yet. Over here. Where did we get to? Did it force itself to stop? Who is this? Oh, no, this is the JSON messaging. I have two different, this is Jose's, I'm sorry. I am just, here we go. Oh, Claude. How far did we get? We only got halfway. Yeah, so this is a API failure. I'll tell it to continue, and I'll finish the talk, and we'll see what happens later. We retry, but like, I don't feel bad about these occasional failures, because if you ever use like ChatGPT, like I think like 20% of my ChatGPT Pro requests just like end up with like a spin, and like it won't even be an error. Sometimes it's like network error, but you know that like network error, like as I'm into this now, I'll talk about this. So like the network error, I'm like, no, that thing produced magical text that didn't write, like it didn't write their spec, right? Like it probably produced a tool call that didn't exist, and then they crashed, and then they're like, oh, network error, right? No, there's enough of this, like, these are non-deterministic. So occasionally, behind the scenes as I'm recursing here, there's also a check in the parser, like it may produce a tool call that's invalid, right? They're pretty good at maintaining those specs, but it may produce something that just doesn't make sense in our system, right? Let's say it's calling a weather API, but it makes up a place that doesn't exist, or makes up an argument. There's code in there to like slap it on the wrist in those cases and have it retry, and you don't see that. And I'm assuming all these providers are doing that. And eventually you have to give up, or it crashes the system. So we'll let it continue here, but yeah, that's Phoenix.new. So next week we're hopefully allow registrations. Right now you can join a waiting list, and you can authenticate with Fly, and everything goes through your existing Fly account. So definitely check it out. I just want to highlight, like, this agent has root access. So we kind of inverted like instead of like, let's not let the agent do much and have to like allow it to do each step, you're just like, no, let it do whatever it wants. We put the guardrails on the infrastructure level, so it's on its own private network. It can reach out to the internet, but it can't reach out to like, production database or anything. You get the Phoenix Run port forwarded URLs. You can get push and pull the project just from the hamburger menu. And then, again, I saw Chrome web browsing, which I think I haven't seen someone do anything like that. We saw the demo, but the cool thing with this is like just how easy this was to build, right? I mean, VS Code code server project exists, so I didn't have to write an editor. But like all this is like a LiveView, which is a process, talking to a gen server agent, which is a process. We start that somewhere on the cluster, and then we communicate with it. And how does the editor and shell that the agent controls, that compute, how does it communicate with that? It's a Phoenix channel using Node.js, right? We have a JavaScript Phoenix channel client, and we just send messages back and forth, right? So like the broker between all these tokens being sent, you know, if you say make the button blue, a tool call falls out, magical text of modify this path with this content, we send that down the channel, we write the file, we lint it with mixed format, we send the result back to the agent with a Phoenix channel push that sends a gen server call, and then the agent gets the response and does a rec post. And like this creates everything we just saw as like this magical decision-led experience, and it was like remarkably simple to make. And this is going to scale to like, let's say tens of thousands of users, right? Like if you think of everything that's going on, all log lines that are being sent from the Phoenix server are being sent back to the agent, up a Phoenix channel to the agent. The LiveView is getting all the tokens. Every message send per token is being sent. Like there's a lot going on there, and I think most folks on most platforms would be like, this is like this. We're going to need a lot of servers, right? And for us, we're like this is what Beam was made for. You're like, you know, it's sending packets around. Like this is like sending text characters is not a big deal. So it's just remarkable, like how much I was able to do, and it was like this is it. Like this is like just remarkable what you can accomplish. And the cool thing about inverting this idea of like, what if we didn't have to do that? Like, what if we gave the agent root, right? Like, no one's just like, if you think from from a first principle standpoint, you're like, well, what if we just let the agent do everything, right? And then you start thinking about like things in different ways. And one of those were, this is an idea Jose had, which I credited him with, and then he said, actually, he wasn't saying this. It was my idea. So I credit Jose with this, and he credits me back. So it's Jose's idea. For the record. Other people might be doing this, but once you'll find if you're in this space is doing diffs on a file is hard. There's oftentimes why like on ChatGPT or Claude, it will rewrite the file, even though it needs to change like 2 lines. Because like to get it to reliably give you working code or any text, it needs to reproduce all the tokens. And you can come up with ways to try to diff, but you'll find that like if you tell it, oh, use Git's universal diff format, because it's seen a lot of those, it will produce universal diff formats and it will completely make up the ranges. So everyone is having this, like everyone has this problem. And like Aider has come up with, I think I'm gonna credit them, maybe someone else did first. Aider has a thing where the agent can call like a search replace tool where the agent produces exact hunks or exact lines to replace. If you like inspect Claude's web traffic, Jose and I were poking around, like it sends like line replace operations for like to replace individual lines. And that's something I was doing, and then I was like, Jose had this idea, like what the agent can run anything, right? We trust it, right? Sure. We don't trust it, but we just let it do what it wants, okay? Because we can just throw the machine away. So we're just like, the agent writes code, let it just write code to write the code. It was essentially Jose's idea, even though he says that's not what he was saying. But that's how I interpreted it, so I went and did that awesome idea that Jose had. So we want to constrain it though, right? The problem is you don't want to let it run, like it could write Elixir to edit Elixir, but then like it might get fancy, right? So I told it like, well, sure, let's just have it write bash, right? So we tell it, if you need to replace a single line, exact hunk replacement, something that can be accomplished with tools like sed, just write bash to do it in the system prompt. And we're gonna call that tool surgical modify. And then what's it do when it needs to like add a dep? It decides, it makes a decision to write some bash, and it like, what? Okay, it produces this. Like, no one understands this except Gary. Gary would be like, yeah, oh yeah, like that's what you would do, yes. But for me, I'm like, yeah, I know what sed is, but sure, here doc, I guess you can do that in bash. I didn't know that until the agent started running it. And it produces stuff like this. And this works remarkably well. Like we saw it for the router, right? And the goal is like it's faster, it's way less tokens to not rewrite files, but you want it to do the correct thing. And you don't want to constrain it, because if you just let it do exact hunk replacement, exact line replacement, that works, but then you still might have to do multiple requests, which is expensive and takes longer. Replace this line, right? Like you want it to be fast and efficient. And here's one example I had today when I was preparing for this talk. I've created a lot of applications, to-do applications. it said, like, I see a couple of warnings in our code. Let's clean them up. And it found filter to use function not being used and the item alias not being used. And with the previous hunk approach or lion approach, like this would have to be like 2 operations if the agent saw this, right? So I was like, oh, I wonder what bash it wrote. So I checked the logs, and like it did this. So I've never seen it do something like, I wrote it because I wanted it to have the flexibility just to do the thing, right? So I went and checked the token output, and it's like, and it even added comments to the bash, right? You're like, what? So it was like, yeah, we'll remove the unused alias in a sed command, and then it ran a separate sed command to remove the filter to-dos. It's like, what? Okay, like this is, so anyway, this is like an example of just like giving the agent the power to, like you give it fewer tools, but more powerful tools, and then it hallucinates. I'm trying to like invert, like hallucinates can be a positive, right? In this case, like it hallucinated this sed command to do this operation that would have been multiple calls, or it would have had to rewrite the whole file. And yeah, there's something uncanny going on here. And then the other example of like giving the agent powerful tools. So MCP is a hot thing these days. The horrible spec, I don't understand it, but it makes sense why people are excited because like MCP is about giving tools to agents, right? These LLMs were awesome. Like we first started using ChatGPT, like, oh, write me a cool rap song, and you're like, wow. But then like you attach them to the real world, and they can do like incredible things. So MCP started where everyone's like, well, I'm going to make an MCP for all my stuff, which makes sense. And you want to give these agent tools. But the problem is, like, if you look at Playwright, which is a headless Chrome browser, Playwright has like the amount of tools to describe Playwright's tools is more lines of code than my headless web browser, which is just like calling Playwright. And Playwright has tools like move the cursor or click and drag. Like the tool, and keep in mind these tool calls. There's a spec out there to do chain tool calls, but right now, like these tool calls are individual API requests. So you're going to send your whole chat history up there, and it's going to be like, now move the mouse, and that comes back, and you're like, I'm going to move the mouse, and you call Playwright, and then you recurse. You send all the whole chat history. So anyway, it doesn't make sense to me. So what we did is like you have a shell tool, again, because we're just giving the agent access. And what can you do with that is you just add a shell command, web, which is just some JavaScript I had to write. Right? I always end up writing JavaScript. Web is a shim to a JavaScript file. And it calls Playwright. It's like 120 lines of code. And we just tell it in the system prompt, you can execute JavaScript with --JS. Interact with the app to make sure it works, okay? That was, the system prompt says something along those lines. And then what came out of that when I gave it this ability is this query selector, right? So not only can it target LiveView forms or the thing that it wrote, it gets the query selector right almost always, which is like in and of itself crazy. It started doing this console log thing, which I didn't tell it to do. And I was like, what? Like, why is it doing this? And it turns out, so it's aware, I'm using these words, the system prompt tells it, you have a web tool, it can fetch web pages, it converts them to Markdown, and you get JavaScript console logs and errors as a section in that document. So it knows that it gets console logs. And there's also a prime directive in its system prompt. And one of the things it must follow is it must make as few, it must take as few steps as possible to get to the goal. And I don't know if that influences this, but essentially what you're seeing here is like a preemptive error correction. So it's basically like, you as a developer writing like console debug. So it has the console log here to see if there are to-dos on the page. That way, if the query selector of document click happened to fail, you wouldn't be like, well, was the query selector wrong? Are the to-dos there? Or maybe the to-dos are empty. So it's like these weird things show up here where you're like, this makes sense, right? It adds a debug for itself ahead of time to prevent it from having to try again and add in the console debug like a dumb human would, right? Like as developers, we're like, this is totally going to work. And then we're like, it didn't work, and then we go add the debug. You're like, no, we should do it ahead of time. So this is just like a cool example of like if you give it a powerful tool and you let it do things with that tool versus constraining it, it comes up with these like novel optimization paths. Kind of freaky too. Yeah, so I was hoping you could sign up today. Next week, I really think like OpenAI said in the coming weeks, and it was like 12 weeks later. But we are quite close now. There's a few things I have to wrap up, like. You have to be able to bill for it, those pesky things. But yeah, we join the wait list now. If you have a current Fly account, you may be able to be invited to try things out ahead of time. But if you're on the wait list, we'll get those folks invited first. So yeah, I'm way over time. So I'll take questions if we have time, but I had a few more slides, but that's it. Thanks a lot. Oh yeah, I forgot about Tron. Is it up? Wait, is this my other account? Sorry, I made a new one because oh no, it tab completed to like a to-dos thing that doesn't exist. Yes, no way, okay, yeah, okay. Awesome, see, look, what? Oh my God, the keys work. All right, what? Okay, so Tetris, it doesn't always get right. Usually it will get to like, it renders a piece, and sometimes a piece falls. It doesn't always get it right the first time, but, so this was like, right, this was what, 0 shot? Like we asked for Tetris, we left. We didn't have to tell it like it works. Like, we didn't have to defile ourselves, and like, there's a button to send error logs to the agent where you're like, oh, I guess I'll click this button to private fix this thing. So yeah, this is it giving like, there's a score increase? Okay, anyway, this is pretty cool. I'm glad that everyone remembered. And Tron, it does amazing with Tron. Yeah, I had a point here. Oh, the generalization. So the thing with LLMs, I mean, they're magic, but like there's no Tron Tetris in the training set, right? Unless someone has made all these amazing games and like hid it from the community. And like, so and this is LiveView, right? So like LiveView for games especially, like we've made a couple like click-based things, but like it generalized, it knows what Tetris is, it's seen a bunch of Tetris code bases, and it was like, oh yeah, LiveView, this total server render browser paradigm, and like, what? Okay, anyway, it generalized into being able to make LiveView Tetris. We could make it multiplayer in real time, and it knows how to do presence. Anyway, awesome. That's it.
Thank you. All right.
Peace out.
We got time for one question while she sets the computer
One
up
question.
there for us. You got it.
Gotcha.
I can't see. Any questions? Yes, you in the back.
Sounds good. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, so the question is, like, to what degree can I get it to write code the way I write code? So it will run the formatter always, because that's how we lent the file, and there's no way around that, but that's the way it should be. But just like Cursor has like a cursor rules, a lot of these approaches, like you have a file where you put in the rules. So there's a rules MD that you can put in the root of your home directory, and that gets indexed into all projects. So like, there's a project index, your whole working files, like what we deem important per language are added to the context and in the system index. So it sees all the files. And one of those is if a rules MD exists, it will just always be there. So you could put your specific things there. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you.